the work you're doing in the diocese, you know, the 3 parishes.
Yeah,
I mean,
pretty unique.
yeah, very unique. So
Yeah.
you launch and I
I'll
should
launch.
button my lip.
And then until I go to 20 minutes, then you unbutton and crack the whip.
I certainly will do
As
that.
I'm, my name's Richard. Hello. I'm Richard. I'm one of those people who's generally always aware of where the camera is. Don't invite me to a wedding, so I'll know where the camera is. You get interesting photos. But yes. So I guess Ron wanted me to talk about my journey to the contemplative tradition, and I'll need to give you a bit of backstory. So hopefully that won't go on too long. But I grew up. I'm a PK. And what I also say is I'm a GPK. I'm also grandparents. Excuse me, what would be the right acronym? My grandfather is also a pastor. I'm not just a pastor's kid, I'm a grandparent kid. You know, my grandfather is an independent fundamentalist Baptist preacher. No denomination, tent revivals, you know, the whole deal. Father reacted strongly against that and went to the Christian Reconstructionist movement. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. How many of you have heard of R.J. Rushdoony? Yeah, this is going to make it online. This will be interesting, but whatever. Life is short. That was a very difficult place to grow up in. Difficult tradition to grow up in. I don't want to get too much into their theology, but I never, even when I was young, I never quite, I think, bought in. Never really felt this was the right path for me. Though now that I'm older, I understand why my parents went that way. But anyway, left there, went to my alma mater, UC Berkeley, which I'm very proud of, clearly. But that was a deeply formative time for me, in that I stopped going to church. But looking back on it, in a way, I think that was God moving me that way for a reason. I had to really, deconstruction is very in vogue now. You hear that word a lot. But deconstruction, I think, sometimes can be good. I think it really depends. For me, it was long. It took almost 10 years, and remarkably, it was almost exactly at 20 to almost exactly at 30. So it's it's very easy to understand the timing in my 20s. So I was largely, I always still believed in God. Went to church maybe once a month. Didn't serve. Very distant. I think looking back, one of the things how I was disformed by the Christian Reconstructionist movement was God was very distant, very rational, and a very rationalistic approach to the faith. So God was very distant, and He would just sort of come down and be present to me when I was bad. Now I never got this from my parents. I think I maybe just picked it up by osmosis. My parents were very loving, good people. But so I'm like, well, if God's distant to me, I'll be distant to Him. You know, God doesn't care, so why should I care about Him? That was kind of the attitude. But Berkeley was a great time for me. I deconstructed, but found really good friends who were very encouraging, and eventually made my way here to Vancouver. And my path back to the faith was I started praying again, like praying, but a bit more seriously, like actually talking with God. Like hey God, remember me? That kid who went to church all those years ago. But I met a great guy who I was at Presbyterian church. Their intern named Roger said, "Hey, I'm joining an Anglican church plant. Do you want to join?" And I had just that week read a short little book, very short little book, an introduction to Anglicanism. So I was like, Anglicanism was very interesting to me, given that maybe where I'm coming back into the faith, kind of what that tradition. I couldn't quite put my finger on why. And then within a week, this guy named Roger Revel said, "Hey, do you want to go to Anglican church plant?" I think God was speaking. So I said, yes. I mean, almost like the next day, I said, yes, I'll go. And so within a few months, he had me, hey, do you want to read at church? All of a sudden, I was like leading things. And within a few years, I became, I guess, a lay leader, which I've been in that church ever since. That church, by the way, is a plant, so I was there the very first service. Mm-hmm. So I've been there since they began. The rector there is named Alistair Stern. And it's a more kind of lower church, kind of evangelical-ish, with actually a growing charismatic kind of stream to it. So those kind of two streams. About maybe 3-4 years ago, I I was like, I'm trying to read in history, but I don't really know where to go or what to do. I'm finishing up my PhD. And a friend in my department said, hey, have you heard of this guy named Ron Dart? And I said, no. And he said, a friend and I talk a lot of politics. He's like, well, he's this guy who does red Toryism. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because that it was kind of a viewpoint that I found amenable. Part of growing up in America in a very radical right type of environment is that church is tied closely to politics. And so I think that's kind of what I tried to deconstruct from. But I wanted to find my way back into what's a kind of a healthy politic and how does that inform my faith. And of course, that's an interesting tradition. So I met Ron, and within 5 or 10 minutes, I found out I didn't know he was Anglican. I didn't know he was Christian. Just a friend from my department. It's like, I know this guy. And within 10 minutes, Ron and I are in a cafe, and he's like, I go to an Anak church in Abbotsford, and a professor, and I thought, so Ron was actually pretty instrumental to getting me into the contemplative tradition. So I think that shows the importance of mentorship and kind of learning from people who've gone a bit ahead of us and kind of passing on tradition and wisdom. But I know I was looking for it. I just didn't know exactly what it would look like. So the last, I don't know, Ron, that was pre-pandemic, maybe 3-4 years ago, something like that. And then within 6 months of that, I felt the call, as they say. Although I don't know how that really is. It's so different, I think, for different people. For me, it was when I was in the throes of seasonal depression. Great place to live for that, right? But though I do love it here, but everything comes with a cost. And it's when I was sitting at home going through a bout of this. And it's funny where God meets you, right? And or I felt like, I was like, actually, I wasn't like elated, and I wasn't speaking in tongues. I wasn't in church. I was like depressed on my couch, But I really felt like, whoa, there's just these kind of thoughts came in saying, you really love the church, and I was like, I could maybe lean into that more. And I've been a lay leader for so long in so many different areas, and I kept getting feedback like, you're pretty gifted at all this. So and then the thoughts were maybe I should pursue something more formal here, ordination. And so then so long story short, I started the process with my parish. That passed. Then I got in touch with Bishop Trevor Walters, and we chatted, and passed the diocese. And now I'm a deacon at 2 parishes, while also helping being trained by a third. So I'm a curate at St. Peter's Fireside, the church I grew up in as an Anglican, which is very kind of cool. The rector still says, I still can't believe you're sitting in staff meetings with us all these years. You told me this 8 years ago. I was, no way. But it's interesting how God works. Also, though, I also serve at a high church, pretty high church, with Father Grady Bueller at St. Timothy's in North Vancouver. High church, even to the fact that he does eastward facing Eucharist, which I actually, nowadays, I mostly do it because I'm the one who helps set the altar now. But anyway, so it's been cool. Our new bishop, Dan Gifford, thought it would be a really neat kind of thing to do, being trained in a higher church and a lower church, and he thought that would be, that's really interesting. And I'm finding out I'm kind of the guinea pig for some certain things. That's what I keep hearing from St. John's, but I'm also an artizo at St. John's, their training program. I'm an apprentice there, so because I'm not a traditional candidate, in the sense that Bishop Trevor said, you're already overly educated, which is true. He says, so, you've already at the point where, after all many years of lay teaching, where we're going to train you up big time, but you don't necessarily have to go back and do a degree program, which was I was very thankful for. So still a long way to go, but the contemplative tradition, that has been an unexpected gift. Even things simple as I am ADHD, and a lot of my hyperactivity comes out verbally. So I'm verbally hyperactive. And I also, you might see me rocking a little, not too much, it's less these days. Or I'll pace around with my rosary in the apartment with my wife. The cat's always interested in what's going on. But my wife's always like, what's going on? The cat more positive, I think. He likes to follow me around when I pace. But it tends to come out verbally. But contemplation just personally has helped me really still my mind, and not just still my mind, because it's not just about that, but listen to God and His call and His presence. Just just be still before God in His presence. And that is something that I never knew that I needed, but I did need it, and now I have it. And one of the great gifts too is now I'm actually even teaching a course at St. Peter's this summer, kind of Christian education course on contemplation. I don't think I told Ron, but and that's been, I never would have guessed this even a few years ago if you told me. They asked me to do it. They're like, Richard, you're in a prayer order, contemplative. Why don't you? You know, sure. And that's been a great gift because I've seen the contemplative. I think it's one of the great things I've seen is certainly at St. Peter's Fireside. There's a great hunger for contemplation. Great hunger. So I've got like 15 people, lay people, all lay in the class. You know, and so many of them are excited to do it. Not just learning about it, but we practice it. We'll practice for a bit at the beginning, then we'll learn. And so that's been a gift. And I actually just found out this week that St. Peter, well, I have to be a little careful because it's online, but there's an opportunity in the future where this might be more formalized, where St. Peter's might be able to train a few people in spiritual direction, and I've been asked to participate in that. So again, some pastor's kid whose mind races 1,000,000 miles an hour and mouth follows not that far behind sometimes. To slowing down the mind and being still before God has been a great gift. And I think that word gift is what I've been reflecting on a lot, and with the lay participants in my course this term, seeing everything. And one of the great gifts of contemplation is that concept of gift, that the life itself is a gift from God. Everything is a gift, right? And so when you kind of let that sinks into your life and mind and heart, you can kind of slowly melt away that your kind of self-centeredness, and you be more God-centered, and kind of the kind of goodness of creation, goodness in other people, which of course obviously is very marred in many ways by sin, but God shines through, and it's brought a lot of peace to my life, and anxious to learn a lot more as well. But is that the 20 minutes?
Well, that's wonderful. And I think a wonderful way to end it is with the Taizé, which is a very meditative approach, contemplative approach, slowing down, being still, and I think